Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the About Circus Podcast. At the studio today, we have Adam Opus.
Surprise!
Surprise!
Bonus episode, baby!
For those of you who are not intimately aware with the logistics of our life, Adam is normally here during the podcast episodes, sitting on the rug, looking at the sound, making sure that everything's okay. And I have actually referenced you and some of the things that you say in the last 2 episodes, I think, while you have been sitting there quietly, not saying anything.
Also, for broader context, I'm not just a rug gremlin. I am your husband and co-director of this company.
Well, I was coming to that.
First and foremost, rug gremlin, then the other things.
Secondly, husband.
Yeah.
We are married and we have a shared art practice. We were thinking about doing this kind of special episode where we talk to each other at the end of the season. But unfortunately, the people we had lined up for our next episode were not available to come.
Rude.
So we're going to do a quick bonus episode here in the middle about Opus and how we work. I'm still going to interview you in the same kind of structure as everybody else, but it's important context for our listeners to understand that we are in fact married and we make art primarily together. 90% of the time we work together.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we have exactly the same process, obviously, and I'm going to be asking questions about you and then maybe I'll make some comments in the middle, but yeah.
No, I think the most interesting thing is the fact that we have quite often conflicting processes, and then that drives really interesting conversation and forces reflection.
Yeah, it's true. Sure, I agree we have conflicting processes, but at the same time, I'm really surprised how rarely we argue over what should happen artistically. We very rarely argue about the result. We mostly argue about how to get there.
Yeah, the goal is always unified. And I think that's what makes us a good team, is the vision is always very similar. It's just about how we're going to get there is sometimes the sticky bit.
Yeah, exactly, the sticky bit. But now we're not going to focus so much on the relationship dynamic aspect of it. We're going to try to stick to the art stuff. We could do a separate episode sometimes about working with your partner and what's that like, but maybe that's not for today. But I do think it's an important thing to acknowledge, because I have listened to a couple of podcasts where somebody is doing a science podcast and they're interviewing their partner who is an expert on the thing.
Yeah.
And then they still on the podcast go well, thank you so much for letting me interview you. And I'm like, dude, you're married. Of course she's on your podcast.
We just spent the day sitting in our studio that we work together at all day, every day, right next to each other. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate. I mean, of course, I appreciate your time, but it's a little bit different for us to be doing this now versus somebody coming from Helsinki or somewhere.
Yeah.
Anywho, that is the introduction. I want to ask you, like I ask everybody right in the beginning, about how do you identify? What do you call yourself?
I identify as 36 ferrets in a trench coat. That's what I feel like. No, okay. I identify as a maker. It would be the word that I would use. I have lots of different roles and lots of different jobs in lots of different contexts, but the one unifying thing that I feel like, even if I wasn't a circus artist or a theater maker, I would still be a maker. I would make art and I would create things from nothing.
Yeah, that's good. That's a cool answer. Does the circus part, is it relevant in there? How deeply do you feel like your identity as a maker belongs in the circus category specifically?
Honestly, not very much anymore. Circus is my community, circus is my education, circus is the lens that I view the world through, but I'm interested in art and making as a much broader context. And my inspiration generally doesn't actually come from the circus itself. It comes from so many other places. And then circus is just the tools that I have quite often at my disposal to express the things that I'm interested in expressing.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to get back to that, like about where does the inspiration actually come from. But let's tackle a couple of other subjects first. The first being that you're the first person that I'm interviewing for this podcast who I see as a Finnish circus maker, because you make in the context of Finnish contemporary circus, yet you are not from Finland.
No, I am not.
Even though this podcast happens in English, everybody else we've spoken to so far is also their nationality is Finnish.
Yeah.
And you are Australian.
I am Australian.
You have been in Finland for 7 years?
Yeah.
How do you see that identity of the nationality? Like, do you see yourself as a Finnish circus maker more than an Australian one? Or how does that square in your head?
I guess I'd never really thought about them in comparison. I have always just thought of myself as a singularity that sort of bounced around. The more I am here, the more I feel a part of the scene. I definitely feel that Opus Company and what we make together is very much a product of the Finnish environment.
Yeah.
And we are part of that community. But then I myself, I'm not sure. It is like, I still feel like an immigrant, or that I am learning the rules and the structures of the Finnish environment. And everybody's very welcoming and very generous with their time and their resources and their willingness to engage with me and my nonsense.
Yeah.
But I don't feel Finnish in that sense.
Yeah.
But then in the same way, I don't particularly feel Australian either, because the Australian identity is so warped because of colonialism. So then in the same way that like circus is my community, I feel like I belong to the Australian community, but then also to the Finnish community. But then through like a personal identity, I'm neither of those in a weird way.
Yeah, that's an interesting drawing of a line there that you said, that you feel like you belong in the Finnish circus community. You are a member of the Finnish circus community, but internally you don't feel Finnish, which makes sense because you are not.
Yeah.
I just had always, in my mind, you're very clearly a Finnish circus artist.
Yeah, right.
But I think it is because the company, like for me, Opus Company is very much a Finnish circus company. And because we exist inside a Finnish system and we have all these goals of working locally where we live in Tampere and participating, engaging with our community here. And we have these networking projects and everything that's so like strongly related to Finland and the growth of Finnish contemporary circus specifically. So then, because you're doing that work with me, I'm like, yeah, of course, you're also a Finnish circus artist because of this is your participation. But I think lots of people can relate to this, like, well, I don't really know who I am or where I'm from because I'm everywhere. I think it's a shared circus experience of not feeling tied to a nationality.
For sure. And when you've spent so much of your life on the road and touring internationally and your friendship group is spread across the whole world and you're not locked down in a single location, then I do think you just become this like weird global identity.
Rug gremlin.
Rug gremlin. A global rug gremlin. Put that on my business card.
I don't normally want to go too deeply into people's personal histories about why they started doing circus and what they've done in the past, because we want to make sure that the hour that we do spend is like as much saturated talking about the art as possible. Like that's the goal of this podcast. But in your case, I'm going to make a little exception, because I think even in our peer group, even in our close friend group of people that we work with and who listen to this podcast, there's lots of Adam lore that they don't know. about you as an artist, like about the things that have led to you being here making art with me and have really deeply impacted what kind of art we make. And I would like to talk about those things for a little bit.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, you went to school in Nika,
Yes.
in Melbourne. You graduated 2016?
We graduated in December, so it was December 2015.
Okay, so
But-
end of 2015, beginning of 2016. And then you had quite an interesting track of working on many different types of shows for a short period of time. Can you tell me about that period in your life before you ended up in Finland? What was your creative life like?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to make work, so it was always this vision of I never had I want to start my company, but I did want to be a creative in the sense that I made theatrical productions. And then I graduated, and then I had this, oh God, how do I put this into a condensed format? I studied, my two disciplines were high wire, specifically duo high wire. So walking with the bar with someone standing either on my shoulders or my head.
Yeah, I think lots of people don't know that about you.
No, that is a very obscure
Like
fact.
Adam Opus, the artistic director of Opus Company. What's your discipline? Duo high wire.
Yeah. And then my other thing was manipulation. And I very much hazard to call myself a juggler because we know so many phenomenal jugglers who that is the core of their identity. And I can juggle, but I feel like it would be rude to put myself in the same pool as Onni Toivonen or Jay Gilligan, those people who are transcending the art form. And then I'm just like, oh, hey, what are you guys doing?
I juggle.
I can juggle too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe if Onni or Jay were here, they might disagree with you. To be like, well, if you juggle, you are a juggler, but we don't need to get into that. We talked about it quite a lot with Onni.
Yes.
But you ended up doing your graduation act, though, as a juggler because of an injury?
Yes. So then a small byproduct of having someone stand on your head for multiple hours a day is that your neck gets rather trashed. So then at the end of school, my spine was struggling. So I did my graduation act as a juggler, and then I graduated, and I had spent all of this time acquiring skill and technique. And then when I left, everyone was like, no, don't worry about that. Just be funny. And I was like, oh, right. You just want me to do this. And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. Just do clown. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad I went to circus school for 4 years
Yeah.
and, I'm at 50 grand in debt for
50 grand, really? I thought it was less. Okay,
No,
never mind.
I mean, it is less.
Never
It is
mind.
less.
It's
But
not important.
Anyway, not important. But then there was this interesting duality of character where I guess it's hard to express this without sort of going into the scene in Australia,
Yeah.
where it's quite different than the European scene, where our base context for shows is cabaret and this like fringe market of shows, and sexy, funny, cool is the formula for shows that you're making because you want to sell them and play them as much as possible.
Yeah.
And we don't work so much on grants or arts funding. We're just like bums on seats, tent in a field sort of
Yeah, it is
stuff.
an aspect of the Australian industry. There are a couple of smaller companies or like makers making with arts funding in this like similar way with Finland, that you are making contemporary circus in the way that we understand it to be.
Yeah.
But a huge part of the market is also the fringe festival circuits, which is like entertainment. It's cabaret based.
Yeah.
Like if you know Struttenfret, and what would be another good Australian company example?
Head First Acrobats.
Head First Acrobats, or like Las Vegas style.
Yeah,
kind of
it is
stuff.
very like on par with Spiegelworld.
Yeah,
It's essentially that.
yeah. So let's recap.
Yes.
In school, you did high wire.
High wire.
You ended up graduating with a juggling act.
Yep.
That was with clubs and umbrellas.
Yes.
And then when you actually entered the industry in Australia, you realized that people mostly wanted like character, funny clown work from you.
Yeah.
And then you entered into this phase in your career where you did a lot of that.
Yeah, so I was lucky. I was quite diverse as a performer and with a skill set. So then I was able to just sort of gig hop for a really long time where I would be like, great, this contract, I'm a clown. The next contract, I'm a wire walker. The next contract, I'm doing deep and meaningless, like broody juggling. And what happened is I got a reputation quite quickly as someone that was good to have in a creation. So then when people were making new shows, quite often I would get hired as an artist for that creation, even if the long-term vision wasn't for me to stay with the show.
Yeah.
Quite often I would come in and build the framework or build an act or create the characters and then run them in and then be part of replacing myself.
I think that's something that I want people to know about you. That is a really unique experience that many European circus makers don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
Because the shows were not production-wise created in this like, okay, a year and a half for creation, then a premiere, and then a year of touring. But the show that you make is still that one show. And of course, like a year and a half of creation to make one show is not the same as spending 6 weeks to make one show,
Yeah.
which is often is in Australia.
I mean, 6 weeks is a luxury. A lot of these shows, we were talking before about 2017? I did 12 creations and on top of that learnt like 2 or 3 different pre-existing shows.
Yeah.
And that's just like obscene.
That's a lot, and I think that was what I was leading up to say. Like that's a really unique aspect of you.
Yeah.
You have made a lot of effing shows.
Yes. And even pre-circus school, I had already been making shows. So I went to NICA when I was 21. So I was like quite late to circus school. But I did that because when I was 16, 17, 18, I was already making work and working as an artist. And then there was this very clear shift of like, okay, I get this scene, I get this trajectory, and I'm much more interested in this European model of making theatrical work.
Yeah.
And my context was, I grew up in Western Australia, which is very much this like old school busker street performer style, like comedy juggler, tall unicycle, juggling fire. And even on the stage, that's still the influence of the performers. And then I had this very formative experience of going to France when I was 18 or 19 and having my first sort of interaction with what I would call contemporary circus. And just being like, this is the thing, this is amazing.
Yeah, and before you move on, I just want to be really explicit in saying that neither one of us is arguing that the circus being made in Australia is not artistically valid or contemporary in the same way that European is. Like, we're not drawing those kind of harsh conclusions.
No, it's just a very different style in the way that, like, it's commercial, so it's closer to pop music.
Yeah, and
then
it
you have jazz
is. There's lots of variety in
Yeah.
like what is being performed. Like, not every Fringe show is a sexy, funny, cool
No,
show.
no.
But I just wanted to say that so people don't come at us for speaking ill of something. We're just talking about your experience.
Yeah,
personally.
and I have a sneaking suspicion the Australians aren't logging into the Finnish podcast.
What? How dare you?
They might be, who knows?
Well, they might be now that you're here.
Yeah, that's true. Now that I'm trash talking them.
No, we're not trash talking.
No, I love
No.
those guys.
Yeah, you quite strongly now at this point in your career identify as a circus director,
Yeah.
but you have been doing that work for a long time and you have been doing it a lot. Like, you have been in Australia involved in many creations with the role of making decisions, of making structural decisions and creating the substance of the show, either from inside or from outside. But your experience is making. Like, even though you have been a performer in somebody else's company, the power structures and the creation structures work much more in a way that it's the artist on the stage who makes the substance of the show, and this like outside director telling you what to do is not so much of a thing.
Yeah,
They're much more collective creations, let's say.
for sure. I graduated, like I said, end of 2015. So 2016, I was like, great, time to make that solo show I've been talking about for forever. And then got into the studio and was just like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I know how to make circus acts, and I know how to like make circus substance or content, for lack of a better word. But in this like, oh, I need to make a show, was this like very clear realization that that was something that hadn't been taught to me. That process had not been given to me directly. So then I sort of went out on this journeyman approach to be like, great, I'm just going to work with as many different directors and creators as I can in as many different types of process and situation and context as I can to see what works for me and how that lands, and take the tools along the way. And then, yeah, after, I don't know, a decade of doing that, you get a pretty good idea of how you like to make and what you're interested in as a creative.
I'm really glad that you brought up the solo show, because I think that's where I wanted to head with the questions next, to try to find out how that experience of working in this commercial market and just like making a lot of shows impacted you then when you did get to a point where you did it for yourself, which for the first time was your solo show, The Drought.
Ah, The Drought. I feel very lucky that I got to make that show. I had a director who is the closest thing that I've had to a mentor, who is Hayden Spencer. He's a phenomenal actor and was a clown with Soleil for a long time, and is now like the coach that they call in when it's not working. He's like a clown sports coach. He'll come in and rev you up and get you all hype.
Yeah, shout out Hayden. He's
Yeah,
still
dude.
quite intimately involved in our creative life.
Yeah, I will be forever in that man's debt
Yeah.
for the time and knowledge he has passed on.
Yeah, Hayden worked with you on The Drought, and it was commissioned for a festival, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, because Hayden was involved, they were kind enough to commission it. So then they gave us a small budget. And then Hayden and I sat down to make the plan, and we wanted to make what we thought was a clown show. But then when we got into the substance of the show, it turned out that it was much more personal, and maybe the themes were not something that you could make fun of. I was interested in mental health, specifically men's mental health. And then Hayden really wanted to look at it from this Australiana lens. So then we went to this rural isolation, and there's this big epidemic of men in Australia, specifically farmers, who end up taking their own lives because they just can't, they lose the farm or the crop dies or something, and they just don't know how to reconcile that within themselves. And then my personal link to that is that my dad took his life when I was 15. So then that's how we ended up there together. And then to go, oh, let's make a clown show about men's mental health and suicide, sort of didn't work.
Yeah.
So then the process was super interesting, and it's still kind of how I work today a lot, is we have two clowns in a room and you make something quite absurd, but then you just play with the tone and texture. And then we would start creating through play and being over the top. And then once we found the substance of what we're talking about, we toned it right down to quite an intimate thing.
You made a clown show and then just dialed down the intensity.
Yeah, but then I feel like the best way to make comedy is to play drama, and the best way to make a drama is to play comedy.
What's really interesting about you as a maker also is your like strong kind of history and conviction about comedy specifically.
Yes.
But you still don't call yourself a clown.
No, I guess maybe also for the same reason that I don't call myself a juggler,
Yeah.
is that I know people who are clowns.
Real clowns.
Real clowns. It is their identity, and deservedly so. And I think comedy, it is one of the hardest things to do well and authentically. And it is done, I don't want to say badly, but I think it is done without the respect that it deserves a lot.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
Yeah.
I just realized now in this conversation, I was thinking about the drought and how we as makers now, Opus Company, is identified a lot through our aesthetics. Like we're really into making things that are like very, very visual and full. And this kind of like aesthetic world building is a big part of what we're both like super, super into.
Yeah.
And in both of our work before we started doing together, it's quite visible. You can see it in the drought. There is like actual desert dirt sand on your stage, and you've built this like kind of falling down hut, and then you have a high wire, and it's very like, considering that it's your first show that you made with a small budget, it's still very like rich in aesthetics.
Oh, it's wild. Like now that I am a producer, like I would say that's my job
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and I run a company, I look back at it and go, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like we shipped in 2 tons of red desert sand.
Yeah.
And then for the high wire, we planted essentially 2 power poles in the ground. Like we got 2 giant sticks, like pieces of wood,
Yeah.
and got someone to drive them into the earth.
Yeah.
And then I built the facade of a house, essentially. And like, I didn't have a team. Like I showed up at Woodford with a suitcase that had a bunch of juggling clubs and an umbrella and like a 2-man tent. And then I just begged, scraped, and borrowed my way to that show.
Yeah.
Like literally was digging in the skip bins, finding pieces of wood, and was looking at my set going, okay, I can take the screw out of that and put it over there because I only have 6 screws that I can afford to use in this show.
Yeah.
And I was super lucky that the festival infrastructure was there and I could borrow tools and I could make stuff. But
Yeah, it was possible in those circumstances.
yeah, but I spent a week and a half, 2 weeks in the sun just like building my world.
And how many times did you actually play?
I think over the festival, I maybe played it 15 times.
Okay. Well, it's still a pretty significant run. You didn't do all that work to play it once or twice.
No, and that was also purposeful. I was like, I'm here, I want to play this show,
Yeah.
you know? And it was the only time that show got to run, despite us
I mean,
trying.
there are some shows that take a year and a half to create that never play 15 times.
Yeah.
So it's just the circumstances. I have to say at this point, I'm loving the Adam lore, but we're like pretty deep into how much time we have left. And I'm going to direct us back on course, away from Australia and back into the present of where you are right now. Now that we know more about your background, let's talk about how you create now, today. Where does your creation process start?
I guess like you prompted at before, I'm a very visual maker. So quite often I'll start with imagery. And then based on that imagery, I'll also look for like atmosphere, or what atmosphere goes with that imagery. And then it's very much sort of character. Character is quite a loaded word, maybe like relationship, or if it's multiple people, I'll be interested in their relationship to each other. And then if it's just a solo, then I'm interested in the person's relationship to the world that they're in, or the image that I've placed that character in.
Yeah. Yeah, I just realized now also, I think I went to say this earlier, but I got distracted, is that the comedy aspect of you hasn't been yet like very present in the work that we do together, because I'm not so much on the like comedy spectrum in what I'm interested in doing. But we do end up still in the same place. Like it's kind of human drama, like what we are performing a lot of the times. And your context for that is just more from like this comedy perspective, and my context for it is from a different perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we made Color Sphere and there was lots of
That's true.
nonsense in that.
That's true. Yeah.
But just at the moment, the stuff that we happen to be interested in is like more, or maybe less like performative and presentational and sort of more conceptual.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we are still holding out for that Adam solo clown show.
Maybe
it's still coming in the future. Yeah, so you talk about starting with visuals and starting with characters. I think that the character and this kind of narrative theater perspective is something that is really interesting about you. I have this part in my solo show in Suddenly and Other Ways to Change where I tell a story about you. And the story goes, I used to think that circus should be just what it is, that it shouldn't mean anything other than itself. I really wanted circus to be pure, to be abstract, and to be valued on its own. And then I met a man who loves stories, and he made me fall in love with stories too. And that is the poetic presentation of what actually happened, is that in the beginning of our collaboration, I was very much like, F theater. Like, I'm not here to mix other art forms. Like, I'm a circus artist. I do technique. But not in the sense that I wanted technique to be high quality. And I had, like, my solo show had talking in it before we met. But in some aspect, I really wanted the circus to be the main thing doing the talking. And you were more like, no, we can just do whatever. Like, we can do a theater show that has circus in it. Like, circus doesn't have to be the central thing. And I think that kind of back and forth has shaped the way that we work together now. And now I would say I'm the more narrative one. Like, I always want to write stories, and you're starting to be a bit more like, yeah, well, you know, it doesn't have to mean everything all the time.
I think that is a really funny thing about us is I'm known as the story guy. But my relationship to story is really different than I think what lots of people would consider story. I'm much more interested in communication. And I feel like every time you present something on stage, you're trying to communicate something to the audience. Be it, hey, look how good I am at juggling, or something much more precise, something in what we would call a thesis.
Yeah.
And language is actually not the tool that I use at all. I'm horribly dyslexic, and writing is not something that I am naturally good at. And speaking is also something that I'm not naturally good at. Like, I think a lot, but the reason that imagery is so important in why I make is because I'm looking for non-verbal ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Because that feels much more natural to me.
Yeah.
So then I love story, but I don't necessarily love linear narrative in that way.
Yeah, and that's something we struggle to communicate externally, because in between us, we use the word story. Say we're really invested in story. But what we mean by that is not a story of somebody sitting down and actually telling you a story literally, although we do have shows that happens in. It's much more about communicating something, and I would argue communicating something with a beginning, middle, and end. Like, we follow narrative structures, but not necessarily in this like spoken theater storytelling. I think somebody else could replace the word story with dramaturgy and it would mean the same thing. Like, we're talking about structure of communication.
I think so. I think the reason we ended up at story is because I went into this deep hole of trying to understand communication, because I had this understanding that what we're trying to do is communicate. So then I started really researching and looking at how humans communicate and why we communicate and how we developed language. And story structure in this idea of like, oh, it's a 3-act or a 5-act is just based around how we naturally process information and tell stories. So then I took that across to circus or something a bit more abstract and went, right, well, how, if I'm trying to communicate this idea and I have this like basic understanding of how humans relate to each other, and not only how they relate to each other, but like the most common form of entertainment or communication that everybody in the audience's brain is primed for, then can I use that as a tool to express the thing that I want to express? Because I have an understanding of how the audience reads this.
Yeah.
Like in the way that you write a book and it's always written left to right.
Yeah.
You know that that is the structure in which someone picks up a book. They're naturally going to look at the left page and work their way across. But if you start writing, bottom right-hand corner in a more abstract way, then it's not going to be as legible to an audience.
Legibility is something that we talk about a lot.
Yeah. And this idea that you have an idea that you're trying to communicate and you want the audience to be able to understand that. And in the way that you're presenting it is legibility in the same way that like handwriting is legible.
Yeah, I think this structure, this narrative structure and these words are really important. And we are not right now trying to, in this podcast form, like explain to the audience how we create specifically, because we do have a quite particular method.
Yeah.
But this isn't the right format to explain that method. But we're talking around the subject specifically in relation to you and your background. Do you think that this, let's call it story now, with the context that we have given, do you think this story orientation in your work has to do with your Australian context? Or is that something that's just personal to you? Because you did grow up as a theatre kid.
I did grow up as a theatre kid. And I think that must have a significant impact on how I make.
Yeah.
But also, virtuosity was never something that I struggled with, in the sense that like I didn't have to worry about being the best juggler in the world because that was never an option, like
you didn't struggle with it as in it was never an option for you to be.
It was just never on the table, so I never even had to look at I need to be the top 1%.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't my thing.
And that's why you don't call yourself a juggler or a clown or something.
Yes.
Because you didn't identify as that being your core pursuit.
Yeah. The thing I was good at was performing and making. And then I guess that freed me from genre also. Like circus was the thing that I was interested in because I liked performing and I liked the physicality and I like work that is read like a poem as opposed to a novel. There's space in the work for the audience to make their own assumptions or relay it onto their life, or it's abstract enough and it's broad enough that there is this intangible element to it as opposed to a more traditional play.
Yeah. We're swiftly running out of time, but I do want to ask about something you mentioned before, which is thesis. And like I was leading to that these words have meaning, and between our collaboration, we have lots of conversations about what does this word mean for you, and we negotiate words with each other in order to communicate effectively about what it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And one of the core words is thesis. Can you talk about what that means in the context of circus show creation?
Yeah, I think thesis, it doesn't have to be that word. An easier word could be artistic statement, or when I learned the concept, it was armature. And armature is the steel frame inside of a sculpture. It's like the thing that is holding everything together. It's the shape of the thing, and it's the moral of the story. And so then when you're making a show, when you're interested in exploring themes, and I think circus does themes really well. And a theme is like a much broader thing, like love or fear or relationships, right? It's like it's a bit more open. And then for me, thesis is like a very concrete statement at the center. And it's the hardest bit to do, I think, is to find the thesis of your show, to be able to do this essentialism of this is the core of this work. And for me, it's like a bullseye on a dartboard. It gives you a very direct point to make towards.
Yeah.
And we've been in processes where the thesis has changed by the end.
Yeah.
But it makes every choice you make head in a similar direction so that the show feels cohesive and meaningful in its choices.
Yeah.
So much of why I think thesis is important is because I'm very invested in the audience's emotional journey through a show.
Yeah.
And I think I have this very strong need for an audience to enter in one place and leave somewhere else. They feel like they've been through some kind of transformation or experience.
Yeah.
And then if you want to take someone somewhere, you have to know where you're taking them. And then that's this like, oh, great, I know you're going to come in here, and now I know where you're going to go. So now I get to craft the journey in between.
Yeah.
And the emotional ride that you're going to go on. And I can...
And that's what you mean when you say story.
That is what I mean when I say story.
Yeah. And I think that is, I think it's quite unique. But it's hard to say from the inside. What I have found to be maybe unique about our working relationship, that we spend a lot of our time in creation really closely investigating what it is that we're trying to communicate. We have a process together where there is quite a lot of design that happens in advance. And we're trying to scale back and forth, like what is a good amount of information to have before we actually physically start working. But one of the questions that we are really determined to try and answer and re-answer throughout is, what is it that we are trying to say here? And it never happens easily right away. It is kind of a back and forth. But once you have it, hopefully by the middle point, you have figured out, oh, this is what this is about. This is what I'm trying to say. Then all the decisions that have to happen after that can be made with that center point in mind. Does this music or does this choreography or does this act serve the thesis? Does it serve the center of the thing that we are trying to always point to? And that has been a super interesting process that we've been going through the last couple of years of developing this. It's almost a communication strategy more than it is a creative method about what happens between you and I. And for example, having been now, we have a show in Circus Next, and we have been involved in a couple of residencies with other people who create in the Circus Next environment, and they're all soloists, the ones that we have met. And it's been super interesting to see how their processes are verbalized completely differently, because we have to verbalize them to each other first before they can even happen. So we have, through working together, developed this methodology where the verbalization of we need to, with words, agree what we're about to embark on together happens much earlier, rather than explaining it after it was done, physically or intuitively. And that's something that would be really interesting to talk about with other people, more broadly. Again, not in the context of the podcast. This is maybe more of a teaser of it. But yeah, it's very weird and interesting. And I'm sure other couples have similar methodologies who work together.
For sure. I think it's so beneficial. It's hard, But it is so beneficial to have to explain yourself to somebody constantly.
Yeah.
English is not your first language.
Yep.
English is barely my only language. So, we're constantly having to define terms and what this means. And contextually, I believe this. And
We have to start closing this conversation soon. And I think because this is kind of our life and we have this conversation over dinner, it's really hard to keep it on track. But maybe we'll do another one of these where you interview me or something. Is there something that you feel like I should have asked you, or something that you didn't get to say about creation or your background or something that is relevant?
no, I mean, it's like, how do you condense a whole life's process into an hour and a handful of questions? And especially in the context of us.
Yeah, I
And,
don't
like-
think that's what we were really trying to
No,
do
no, at all.
either.
But even just like, I could have spent an hour just on the minutiae of the Australian scene.
Because with all the other interviewees, we've ended with this like, well, how do you see the future as, and what do you hope, and what do you observe? And as a member of the Finnish circus community, what do you see your role here in the future? Or what kind of hopes do you have for us, and what do you, I don't want to say what do you hope to achieve, but where do you want to place yourself or us as a community going forward?
I think when you're like freshly graduated, you're quite selfish in this way of like, okay, I need to find my self-work and I need to make shows and I need to do this. And now that we've been here and, we have a life and a family and a company, and you start to look much closer to home. Like it was always, oh, which country am I going to go to next? And now it's like, oh, how can I make my immediate community better for the people around me?
Yeah.
And then now looking at like the local council and like how we can work with them to bring contemporary circus to a much broader demographic.
Yeah.
To do this advocacy for the art form and create opportunities for the people that care about this thing as much as we do.
Yeah.
And looking to future generations and being like, right, we had to figure this out, and how can we help those guys bypass these struggles so that they can be better than us? Like I think this creating a world for your community that is better than the one that you got given is the goal.
Yeah, be better than us and suffer less than we did.
Yeah.
Would be the ideal
I
situation.
think so, yeah. And then I guess within the context of Finland is, this is my home now. This is where my family are, and this is the place that has given me more than anything else. So then I feel very strongly about Finland, which is funny because you were at the top of this. I was like, I don't feel Finnish, but I'm also like a Finnish advocate, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, this is contextual to our life and our relationship, but both of us every once in a while look at our life, look at our studio where we are right now, and then think about it from where you came from and go, why? What?
Yeah.
Why are you here? Like, you were born in the meth capital of the world.
I was born literally at the end of the earth. I was born at the very bottom of Western Australia, which is if you keep going down, you hit Antarctica.
Yeah.
If you go left, it's nothing but desert for 3 days. And if you go right, it's like a 9-hour drive to the nearest capital city.
Yeah. And from that place,
Yeah.
from a family that doesn't really have anything to do with the arts or performing arts necessarily, you're in Finland as a director of a contemporary circus company, like that's a strange trajectory to take in your life. And every once in a while it happens that we'll be doing something and you'll just be like, why am I here?
Yeah.
What kind of decisions did I make in my life to be in this position right now?
Yeah. Like what random happenstance made me end up here? And it's been a wild ride, but I'm very grateful so far.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, just before we started recording this, you spent an hour and a half in a circus production workshop on Zoom or something,
Yeah.
Google Meets. And after it, you said, oh, my brain is fried. I'm not meant for this. I'm supposed to be doing meth in a ditch. I think that sums up like the kind of extraordinary nature of who you've become, not only to me, but to this community. I'm so biased, of course. I love you.
Yeah, you have to say that.
I have to say it, but it's also truly like what I believe. I think that we are better for having you here. And my relationship to my own community is definitely deeper because of you. I think you have a capacity to connect with people that I just like ride on. Like I'm not socially nearly as skilled as you are, but because you are, then I get to kind of be there and be like, hey guys, I'm nice too. Maybe that's an over exaggeration, but I really enjoy the way that you have embraced this community and how you engage with it, and that we get to do that together is such a big privilege. And thank you at this point to everybody who's come to the podcast so far to talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's
including
been amazing.
you.
It was a long trek.
It was a long trek.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say?
No, just thanks to everybody that's been listening. It's been so nice. We're getting like so much lovely feedback, and it's always weird starting one of these things because you're like, oh, this is like the nichest of the niche.
Yeah.
Who is gonna listen? And then every time we post one of these, we get more and more people being like, this is amazing. Like,
it's super interesting that we intended to want to like capture some kind of a snapshot of time about who is making and why and how do they make it. But then in the end, we always end up talking about community.
Yeah.
And about connecting with each other. I haven't quite fully formulated that trajectory yet, but maybe when we get to the end of this season, we'll have another chat to debrief what that means and how we ended up there. But thank you for being my community, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing me into this weird and wonderful world of ours.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's really strange. Okay, well, I think on that note, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, and I'll go back to being a rug gremlin.
Being a rug gremlin, yeah.